What an extraordinary gift to have this music from two different choirs here in the DC metropolitan area, because we can do this on digital platform. And then to have this gorgeous poem by Odette Fulbright with this wonderful reading by Anjun. Thank you so much. It helps hold the space that we're trying to create this morning about the grand dreams of America and who we want to be, and the reality of so many who are struggling to achieve those dreams. I know of a family of 5. Mom, I'm gonna call her Teresa. It's not a real name. She's married, a stepfather, and young adult son, an 11th grade daughter, and a middle school son. The mom is an immigrant from Central America. She got her US citizenship just in 2019. The kids were all born here in the United States, and Teresa, though unfortunately has chronic illness, but she was still working part-time. And then she was furloughed last March. The stepfather, who is the primary source of income, was undocumented, and they had just started his paperwork when he was picked up by ICE late in 2019. He's still in detention now, down in Richmond. Teresa got COVID in March, as did her 3 kids. And the young adult son is struggling to work in construction with lingering COVID symptoms. The teen daughter, she had to drop out of high school, and she is now the primary income for the family. And the middle school son, boys, he's struggling to keep up with virtual school. They had to hire a lawyer to help with their husband in ICE detention. A lawyer charged $11,000. Teresa doesn't have that kind of money, so she took out a title loan on her car. Yes, one of those places on Route 1 that charge an exorbitant 25% interest per month. And between that loan and rent and food, forget health insurance. They're just 1 or 2 steps away from being homeless. And just because there's a moratorium on evictions doesn't mean that people aren't being evicted. I know of another family, a father with 2 young children. We'll call him Marco. He works as a painter. He manages his meager income with his 2 kids by renting a room from a friend in his friend's house. But Marco's hours were significantly reduced due to the pandemic, and now he needs to go to agencies for gift cards to buy milk and food for his kids. And he can't get rental assistance from the state because his friend won't give him a document of a rental agreement. He has no proof. I know of another family I want to offer to you, an immigrant mother from African nation. I'm going to call her Dada. She has also become a US citizen, and she has 2 daughters. Both have autism. Dada got a job just last spring with Fairfax County Schools, and they had just finished the background check when COVID hit, and she was furloughed. Her ex-husband is out of work due to having COVID, and he was able to give support payments for a long time. And then last fall, when the stimulus money came in for his daughters, he didn't give it to the mom. So Dada is also struggling with rent, food, power bills, and school issues. All of these people live in Fairfax County. They're not far from here. All are urgent stories of inequality. They were high risk even before the pandemic. They were part of the population that has chronic indicators of instability and of the increasing inequality in our country. We know the pandemic has only exacerbated anyone with chronic indicators that have been at risk and vulnerable, such as immigration status, low education, people of color and indigenous, queer, non-binary, disabled. Basically anybody who isn't fully abled, cisgender, straight, and white. We at Mount Vernon Unitarian Church, we are finishing our month of reflection on justice. And we have to include a look at the complex issues surrounding inequality. After all, it's embedded in our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. President Biden has prioritized inequality in his policy goals. And there is massive evidence that inequality has grown exponentially in the last decade, never mind with the pandemic and the current economy. Alarm bells have been going off, all levels of government, faith leaders, academia, policy wonks. And the majority of the American population puts inequality at the top of the list of concerns, and we should. Perhaps some of them have read a book by Walter Scheidel called The Great Leveler, Violence in the History of Inequality. It was published in 2017. And in it, he says his history shows us that it is all but impossible to reduce inequality peacefully. When inequality gets to a certain extreme, 4 things historically have happened. Mass conflict, as in war, violent revolution, think Russia in 1918. 3, state collapse, yeah, Rome fell, or lethal pandemic. Think the Black Plague in the 14th century. The common denominator for all 4 of what history has shown us is mass death and suffering. When I first heard a story in NPR about this book, I was in shock. I could not get my head around this history lesson. I was stunned. I felt myself living in very muddy moral waters, starting to feel the creep of despair. Such history can utterly incapacitate a society. Oh man, it will feed pessimists for years. But I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realistic optimist, is what I like to say. I'm a hopeful person. And I therefore live with gratitude that I have job security, healthcare, education, my health. All of these are recognized as privileges, a combination of good luck and choices I've made, but I've had access to resources because of my status as a white, educated, cisgendered American. For all my gratitude, I keep thinking of Jane Addams, American activist and reformer, who said, "The good we secure for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secured for all of us and incorporated into our common life." Again, the good we secure for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secured for all of us and incorporated into common life. If we live our Unitarian Universalist second principle of justice, equity, and compassion for all, if we believe that none are free until we're all free, if we truly believe that none of us are secure until we're all secure, if we truly believe that none of us can fully live into who we want to be, if we believe all that, well then, it puts the burden on us to defy history. We need to change the forces and create new future. We have a pandemic, but it doesn't have to be the cause of death and mayhem like the plague of the 14th century, where 1/4 of the European population died. And as concerned as I am about Scheidel's research, I also know we're in a different era. We're different people. We have better understanding of inequality and the causes of inequality. We have different resources. And I like to think we're more creative and have a greater capacity for problem solving. Even just talking about inequality helps. These vast issues of inequality, they feel overwhelming. So it's not uncommon for us to just say, oh yeah, inequality is a problem, but never really get into it. But we can't pretend it's not there. We have to look at inequality right in the gut, and we have to talk about what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're feeling. We can start with a deeper understanding of the pressures of the daily struggles of those living at the margins and those engaged in resilience. We start with stories like Teresa, Marco, and Dada. And then we get broader into an understanding of social pressures, political pressures, worldview. There's a lot of debate, but many sociologists and economists say it boils down to two tensions that create polarizing views. Those two tensions are people equal, and how to distribute resources. These create high conflict. At a minimum, they live in constant tension. Are we equal? Imagine preparing a will. It's a very privileged act of wealth. In your preparation for your will, do you distribute your assets equally to all family members? Yes would be the easy answer. And theologically, as Unitarian Universalists, we're guided by our first principle of all have inherent worth and dignity. And I think it's fair to say that extends to belief that we're all born equal and should be treated equally. We have also, as a point of orientation, our Declaration of Independence. It's self-evident that all people are created equal. But in reality, we have different skills, virtues, and health needs. What if one of your children has a greater capacity, earning capacity, than another child? One child may have particularly long-term health issues or disabilities that are expensive. You may have a sibling who doesn't have retirement fund enough for any number of reasons. What if one child is Black and another child is white? One child may be trans and faces a lifetime of oppression and bias. Another child may be a genius but can't remember your birthday. When we start to unpack equal but not equal, we have to accept it's not a binary choice. We treat all people equally, fundamentally equal, but we are not all equal. It does take some complex thinking. We need to stay grounded in our principles of treating everyone equally under the law to avoid discrimination, ensuring access to housing and food and education and healthcare. Which puts us firmly into problem 2. What about resource distribution? If everyone is inherently, fundamentally equal, but we do not have equal skills, talents, or born with equal resources, how do we distribute resources? And this question impacts us individually, whether you're filling out your will, but it impacts us as families and all of society. Congress, you may have noticed, recently sidestepped this very problem with their stimulus checks. Everyone below a high middle class income got $600, even if they had a job. Didn't matter. Everyone was treated equally under that certain income level. Now, the next debate that they're looking at in package is they're going to lower that income level because the studies show that those middle income earners, well, they saved their $600 rather than putting it back into the economy. They didn't buy anything. At least that's what the studies show, but I'm telling you, I'm still waiting on my lazy boy. There's such a back order on it. Somebody's buying those things. One answer, though, is we can prioritize our resources, right? We start to prioritize things, but that's a value-based decision. And it gets tricky very fast. We can see that in education, charter schools, zip code inequality, healthcare, legal system, you need a lawyer, $1,000 for a man held by ICE. Right now, our government is engaged in value-based decisions about the distribution of our vaccines. Once you get into creating policies and laws, debates heat up fast. We can quickly lose sight of the very people that we're supposed to be helping. Those who are suffering, terrified, and wondering if their community will help them. If we leave politics aside just for a moment, set aside politics, and we look at it from our lens as religious and philosophical perspective, we sort through questions of who are victims of force beyond control, pandemics, hurricanes, cancer, and who are agents of change. This is a really important distinction in our worldview, and it feeds our theology and our philosophy. It comes down to luck versus choice. A person born in the wrong place, wrong time, no fault of their own, maybe hit by a drunk driver, left with long-term injuries. We call this bad luck. Versus the choices we make, driving while drunk, choosing to not wear a mask. That's a big one right now. Agents of change that impact others. How much we are agents of change that is free to make our own decisions impacts the perception of politicians making the policies and the laws. So the studies show that conservatives tend to focus on agency, the belief that we make choices and then we have to live with them. Where liberals lean toward luck, the idea that we're victims and we need help. Neither is entirely true, and both are true. Both chance and choice impact our lives. An important side note here, folks, this is a theological position. I do not believe in a great puppeteer God who has control from the micro to the macro decisions. I believe we have agency and we are subject to luck. So start the debates, and then we quickly lose focus of our moral orientation. The role of religion, the role of the synagogue and the temple and the church and the mosque is to keep pointing our way back to the grounding principles that help sort critical moral issues and avoid, hopefully, war, rebellion, or state collapse, or a pandemic that has gone completely awry. As we sort through our current pandemic, we want to avoid massive suffering and death, as we saw in the Black Plague. So we turn to religion and our scriptures to compel us, to bring us back to our moral center. I want to offer just one of my favorite scriptures from Christianity. It's one of my favorites. It's Matthew 23. I call it the hypocrisy scripture. Matthew 23, verses 23 through 24. Listen up. I love this scripture. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but follow a camel. I love that scripture. They just lay it out. Yeah, you can't argue with that. You strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. What a great image. And for Unitarian Universalists, we may use Christian scriptures and Jewish scriptures or Buddhist and Muslim, but we also have our own point of orientation. We've compiled our principles, and again, I bring you back to the second. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations is a moral call to do right and not be hypocrites. Along with our scriptures and our grounding principles, we're also morally guided by the stories of those who are struggling. Odette Fulbright's beautiful poem is a moving reminder of the devastating pain and suffering. When she writes, "Did you rise this morning, broken and hung over with weariness and pain and rage, tattered from waving too long in a brutal wind?" I think of Teresa. I think of Dada and Marco. But Fulbright reminds us about living with resilience and courage. Get up, child. Pull your bones upright. Gather your skin and muscles into a patch of sun. Draw breath into your lungs. You will need it, for another day calls to you. I think of Teresa and Marco and Dada. Right here in Southern Fairfax County, we have so many resources that we can tap into, and with our moral call, be part of this creative solution that we desperately need. I highly recommend Poor People's Campaign. That's a national campaign that is amazing. Poor People's Campaign, they do amazing things. And we have our own Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Advocacy and Education, Unitarian Universalist for Social Justice, UUSJ. We have United Community, the direct service agency here in Southern Fairfax County. And we also are holding up this month Arcadia about sustainable food and resources so people can eat. Fulbright ends with a reminder that those in the bottom of inequality are not alone. When she writes, "But remember this, tired as you are not alone. Here and here and here also, there are others weeping and rising and gathering their courage. You belong to them and they to you, and together we will break through and bend the arc of justice all the way down into our lives." Such gorgeous words, and I have such gratitude to Odette Fulbright. My friends, I am asking you this morning, how are you bending the arc of justice? How are you helping your neighbor? How are you hearing their stories? And more important, what are you doing with those stories? How is your heart being compelled? It is morally impossible to be neutral in the massive crush of the forces of inequality. And our fellow Unitarian John Cation was not neutral in the face of oppression, injustice, inequality. He was an agent of change. Despite being born Black in the South, through no fault of his own, he grabbed his identity and he used it. It's important to know our resources and our capacity. We can donate money and time and use our education to pay attention to the policies and laws. All those studies that we can do now, Russia did not have them in 1918. Rome never considered and conducted any studies. And in the 14th century, those 25 million dead, they never knew the resources they had. We have so much at our fingertips to fight for our neighbors. There are policies and laws that leading economists and experts agree. If we go far enough, are creative enough, and give our neighbors a fair and equitable distribution, we can do this. So I'm inviting you, support our legislators at the local, state, county, federal, and that requires we pay attention. It requires us to defy history. Find groups that represent your values, can alert you to bills that are pending and need your support. I recommend Virginia Interfaith Center, Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions, Interfaith Power and Light, the Poor People's Campaign, UUSJ, Good Hope Housing, Rising Hope Mission Church. All of these organizations are doing some amazing work. And I'll tell you one project that I'm working on right now as I wrap up. I've been working with Rising Hope and Ventures in Community, and we're creating a video of people who are telling their stories of resistance and resilience and the pain and their suffering. We're going to compile one 15-minute video with their stories, and then we're going to use that to influence policies and laws in our cities, counties, and our state. We're going to sit down and meet with Board of Supervisors, with state legislators, and we're going to identify chronic legislation that is being so hard on our neighbors, making sure their stories are not lost in this pain and suffering. When we hear their stories, when we hear the stories of Teresa, Marco, and Dada, our hearts break. But then the next step is we find ourselves compelled to take action and change history. Blessed be and amen.